Well, good morning. Today, we're going to have an incredibly important discussion, and I am really, really thrilled to welcome two leaders who are just very near and dear to my heart. The first is to welcome back fan favorite, show favorite, Dr. Kim Norman, psychiatrist and distinguished professor of adolescent and young adult health at the UCSF Weill Institute for Neurosciences. And co-presenting today with Dr. Norman is our very own Christina Jones, SVP of Customer Marketing, Brand Partnership, and C-Suite Engagement. And we are going to have a very real and very important discussion about how to be an anti-racist. So, one of the very important things that has come out of all of this current unrest is at least people are acknowledging the depths of systemic racism that is happening and the very real need for change. But what I think we're also learning throughout this journey is that it is simply not enough to not be a racist. That what we actually need to do is take a very big, bold, vocal, and active stance for being an anti-racist. And so Dr. Norman and Christina, I really want to thank you for making time to be with us to here today and to really try to help lead us through this conversation. We will be taking questions at the end. You can go into the Be Well chatter group and post some questions there. And I'm also really thrilled that today we have Lola Banjo, the Global Events Chair of our Bold Force Employee Resource Group, who's also going to help facilitate some Q&A. So a really great way to start off your week. Dr. Kim Norman and Christina Jones, I turn it over to you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to join for this really important conversation. I think that, I've had this conversation with multiple people, and it is, why is it so hard for people to have this conversation? It seems to be really triggering. Dr. Norman and I have talked about this a lot. Why do people feel like they need to get on the defensive? I think of all the conversations that we need to get comfortable having is this one. But in order to have this conversation, first you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable on both sides. I think that, for white people, this is probably challenging. The first reaction is to say I'm not racist or like get defensive. I think, what is not always acknowledged is like how triggering this is for Black people. It's really hard, every time I'm on one of these equality calls, hearing how my fellow colleagues are being, the issues that they've had, not just at work, but externally. These are things that we grow up and, it's just part of life. I was just saying right before we went live is on my LinkedIn, I made a post and people have been trolling it. And my initial reaction was to delete it because I was super annoyed. But then I was like, I'm just going to leave it up as an example of ignorance. Like, why is this conversation where a little girl is chanting for her rights, triggering so many people and making them so upset? I think one thing to remember in these moments is that people are saying this little girl is robbed of her childhood. Well, I hate to break the bad news, but if you're Black, you have to have these conversations with your children right about this age. And the little girl who was chanting "No justice, no peace" is maybe a year younger than George Floyd's daughter. So while, some people have the luxury of shielding their children from the injustice that is out there, a lot of us don't. And, again, until we are all capable to have these conversations together without defensiveness, without throwing stones at each other, is the way that we're going to be able to move forward. Anything less, I worry that, 40 years from now, our children are going to be having the same conversation. We need to get it, but we have an opportunity to get it right this time. So that is why I'm here. That's why I keep having these conversations. I hope that the more conversations that I have like this, the more people feel comfortable to raise their hand and say that they're willing to take this conversation forward on their own.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, Christina, and I really cherished our conversations. it is an uncomfortable conversation, and I think it's uncomfortable because it taps into our core shame and guilt when we stop and think about racism. We are all racist, at least we are complicit in racism by not speaking up and not doing enough. A couple of months ago, early in quarantine, my daughter called me. She said she and her boyfriend wanted to come over with a pizza and a bottle of wine. And I said, that sounds lovely, but we're under quarantine. Even though you're my daughter, you can't come into the building. And she said, no, Dad, we're going to go across the street to the park, and there's a picnic table. We'll be, outside and socially distanced. It'll be fine. And they said, I've noticed in the neighborhood that police have been walking around and actually breaking up small gatherings. And she said, Dad, we're white. They'll leave us alone. And if they did want us to move on, they'll be nice about it. And I can't tell you how my eyes widened and how sad that conversation made me, because I'm 67 years old. My earliest memories are news stories of Black people being murdered because they were engaged in voter registration or trying to go to college at an all-white school. I certainly remember, as I remember the day President Kennedy was assassinated, I remember the day Martin Luther King was murdered. We have had decades of Black studies programs. We all participate in workshops on unconscious bias and microaggressions, and we all learn all of that, but nothing has actually really changed in the 67 years of my life. I want to be more hopeful because something is different now. In the 60s, during the Civil Rights Movement, the marchers were all Black. There were a few whites, but it was really all Black. Now, it's America, it's in the suburbs, it's every ethnicity, all Americans, and that's hopeful. But my fear is that if we simply leave it as a conversation, that nothing will really change. And like you said, Christina, 40 years from now, we'll be in the exact same place. So I think the first thing we have to do, certainly as white people, is not say, I'm not racist. Actually, that's about me. What I could say is, I'm not a victim of racism. That's true. But when I say I'm not racist, and when my agenda is to prove to you, Christina, that I'm not racist, I'm not listening. That's about me. So the first thing in listening is don't make it about you, listen to the other person. But we also have to listen because I think it's also kind of offensive to say to a Black person, I'm going to start a book club or I'm going to start a discussion group, because nothing, we've been doing that for decades and nothing is really changing. Empathy starts with listening and understanding, but empathy also requires action. Just using a very simple example, if you told me, man, it's really hot and stuffy in this room, an empathic statement would be to say, yeah, it's hot and stuffy in this room. But true empathy would mean I go open a window, or turn on an air conditioner, take an action that actually changes the situation. So we got to start with a conversation, but then we have to take an action.
No, I agree. I think we've had a lot of conversations, and again, I think it was really jarring for me even to acknowledge like how much emotion was coming up, and like all the cycles of like grief, rage, outrage, like anger, sadness, depression, helplessness. Like helplessness is a space that I don't usually find myself in, right? Like usually I can see a problem and I can charge towards it. This time I just felt defeated. It just was coming from all angles. And when you are confronted with something that for so long, you just kind of push to the back burner, it is overwhelming. I think the easy thing to do is to just kind of sit back and say like, my friends are posting that they are standing in solidarity with me. It's like, okay. I was not impressed with the white ladies giving Black women their mics on social. What does that mean? Where's the sustainability in that? I think, in order for us to make change, we are at a great company where there is an appetite for change. I welcome people to look into their own organization and see who's not being seen and elevate them, like elevate their voices. People are falling through the cracks. And what is happening is outside there's a war being fought in the streets so that we won't be murdered, even if we're doing something as innocuous as bird watching in Central Park. I rest my case with Amy Cooper saying she's not racist, right? Or Lisa Alexander, who didn't believe that a brown person lived in her neighborhood and was offended by someone saying Black Lives Matter. And I'd like to unpack the Black Lives Matter as well. When I say Black Lives Matter and then someone comes back and is like, wrong, all lives matter. Do they?
Yeah.
I continue to say Black Lives Matter until we can all agree that all lives do matter, because I think what is clear is that currently that's an aspirational statement and we need to do better. And to your point, like white-splaining racism to me is challenging. It's equally challenging to me to see that systemic racism is becoming a buzzword. When you're one of 3% at an organization of like 50-some thousand people, it can feel really alienating. I welcome every single person who's reached out to me to ask how I'm doing. The only thing I would say is when you say quietly, I would ask that you don't say it quietly, that you experience the same outrage that I'm having and do something. But it's hard when everybody's asking me, what can they do? Because I don't know. Take the time to maybe educate yourself and understand what can you do to make things better. And if you can't fix everything outside, how can you at least make sure your colleagues and your friends are doing better?
If the first step is deep listening, and that should be non-defensive, deep listening, not about me, but listening. The second step, I really borrow this from the 4-step and 12-step programs, is to do a searching and fearless moral inventory of oneself about ways in which, where do I have racist attitudes? For Lisa Alexander, an educated CEO who certainly knew all about Amy Cooper in Central Park, to go out and do the same thing. For white officers to murder a young Black man who was sleeping in his car at a Wendy's after all of this is going on. It really demonstrates how it's cultural, how deeply embedded it is in our culture, and we have to address it. So I've been trying to do that fearless moral inventory the last few weeks, and I was watching a story about a NASCAR race driver persuading NASCAR to take off the Confederate flag, and of course he should do that. And I remembered 15 years ago, at one of the most touching moments of my life, I was at Fort Benning in Georgia. My son, who post 9/11 wanted to do his part to join the global war on terror, so he joined the Army, and Officers Candidate School was at Fort Benning. And it was very touching because my father was a paratrooper in World War II, and because he was a former officer, he could pin the lieutenant bars on my son. A very touching moment for me and my wife. Never dawned on me who the hell Henry Benning was. And I just this weekend said, okay, let me find out who was Henry Benning. Well, he was a Confederate general who was an ardent anti-abolitionist. He said he would rather have a horrible disease than see Black Americans freed. He was instrumental in persuading the state of Virginia to join the Confederacy. So, oh my God, I was there, seeing my son. There were 100, he was in a class of 100, and over half the class were African American. And it never occurred to me that those African Americans had to endure being trained, being commissioned as officers at a base named after a racist. Just never had occurred to me. I would go ballistic if a school was named after Adolf Hitler, or if there were statues of, Hitler's henchmen being honored. So why wasn't it intolerable to me that we'd have military bases named after slavers? So that's work I have to do. And I have to look at every other way in which I am complicit. So that's part of that fearless, inventory. Elie Wiesel, who was a Holocaust survivor and Nobel laureate for his writings about the Holocaust, taught us that the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. And let's face it, silence is the voice of indifference. And if we are silent, we are complicit because we're allowing angry, hateful, hurtful, dangerous voices to have the stage. We're not speaking up, we're not doing enough. We have to make racism intolerable.
I I love that. I've been seeing people like who are usually very outspoken and feel very comfortable fighting for, gay rights, all of a sudden get nervous tapping into the conversation about race because they lose friends, people unfollow them, and is it right? And I put that up with the same thing of like, why is it okay to have things named after people who owned people? Why is it wrong for people to say vocally that they don't support racism? Why does it trigger so many people? And then why do people who are so comfortable fighting the fight for like gender equality, same-sex equality, get so uncomfortable when it comes to fighting for a fellow human's rights
Yeah.
based on their skin color?
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think one of the things that we have to guard against is to some degree compassion fatigue. We are, still living through a pandemic. We have abuse and trauma for the LGBT community, who at least had a good day today because of the Supreme Court decision, guaranteeing equal rights in the workplace for LGBT. But, and we, still have brown people, children separated at the border and in cages, and we just have to be careful that we don't take our eye off the ball around Black Lives Matter. We need to address all of those things, and we can. Look, we have to give ourselves permission to take breaks. I got to turn off the news sometime. I walk my dog and I think about how pretty it is outside, not about, the world. So give myself permission to take breaks, but I cannot give myself permission to become complicit. We can't burn out. We have to keep the energy. We have to keep the focus, and we have to do our part. We have to teach our children about racism. It's not enough to say to my children, I'm colorblind. I'm not racist. Our country is founded on equality. No, we have to tell our children we're not all the same. We're not treated the same. We are all equal, but that's not how it happens in practice. We need to bring our children to the protests. We need to show up. I mean, for me, my mantra is listen up, speak up, show up, and follow up, because it is going to be a long haul to truly eradicate racism from our culture. And it's going to be a battle and a long one, and we can't afford to burn out.
I would like to say something before we go over to questions, and it is that, Black people aren't always comfortable with therapy. I would like to say that I'm fortunate enough to be able to speak to Dr. Norman. I think that it is important for Black people in this time to look for help. It is overwhelming. The news is overwhelming. The fear is overwhelming. The frustration is overwhelming, but we still have to come to work. Work is still important. We need to still pay our bills. We need to have our insurance, but we do need to find some space where there's someone that you trust, that you can have a conversation with about how you're feeling, because in this situation where we're used to like kind of swallowing things and push them down, this is going to bubble over in ways that are unhealthy, and that really worries me. So I do hope that those that are listening do consider, we do have great insurance here, use it, and do get some help, or whatever that shows up as for yourself. Is it meditation? Is it therapy? Is it family? Is it friends? Something, but just don't sit and hold it all in. I was on a call right before this where someone said that it's embarrassing. You and I had this conversation. I was embarrassed as well. And you don't even understand, like, why am I embarrassed about this? You just have to like let it out and work through it. So thank you. And thank you for being amazing, Dr. Norman, as always.
Thank you.
As always, indeed.
I just want to, in terms of actions, I think we all need to think about what are ways that we can recruit and promote people of color in our work groups. We need to support Black businesses, and we need leadership change. We need to get out and vote. Those are three, big things we all need to do and we all can do.
Yes, agreed. I love what you said, Dr. Norman. Listen up, speak up, show up. And I like follow up. I really, really like follow up. I want to just touch on one quick thing, and then I'd love to hear from Lola. I'm curious to hear about some of your thoughts as we start to become more active allies. Something that's been a little bit disheartening and concerning to me is how we keep that sustainable role that role that we need to play, that really active role, how we sustain that, especially in the light of kind of acknowledging that we're not always going to get it right. I've seen, instances of, like you were referring to, people who should know better, and they mess up. And they mess up because they've been making bad choices, unconsciously for years. And now, it's being pointed out, and that's good. That's how we're going to get change. Mm-hmm. But I also at times see it happening in a way that is destructive, and that isn't helping build up, solidarity. It's creating fear, and when we get back to show up and follow up, and it's like, oh God, well, last time I spoke up, it didn't go well. Yeah. I think so. How should we be thinking about this from a long-term game plan?
I have one, and I know Dr. Norman's going to have a much more thoughtful answer, but for every person who has a mom who cares and, wants to make sure that their kids are informed and value all lives, there's people who unfortunately have not had the same upbringing. I try to create, as upsetting as it is, I do try to create space for people to change their mind. I do try to, and my colleagues will back this one up, when people say something stupid, I do want to understand why they said it and give them the opportunity to consider that maybe they're wrong, and then create space for them to come over to the right way of thinking, if you will. I think just isolating people because they say dumb things is not helpful to if they're willing to change. If they're ignorant and stand strong in their belief, I don't have a lot of patience. But I do believe that if, the numbers are not in our favor, if we're just going to keep throwing rocks at everybody if they say the wrong thing and don't try to educate them.
Yeah. I think that is thoughtfully and beautifully stated. Yeah, that, we have to have that beginner's mind, when we listen and when we speak, and to try to be non-judgmental, but we have to step up and call people out in a way that enlightens them. I was very impressed by Christian Cooper, the black bird watcher in Central Park. His reaction to the whole thing was, that lady's got to do some deep soul searching. She's got a lot to learn about herself. And I think that was such a beautiful attitude. I think President Obama spoke on this yesterday when he just talked about, don't be self-conscious. I mean, we're all bumbling along. We're all going to make mistakes. The fact, if your heart's in the right place, the words will follow. I always love, my favorite quote of all time is from The Little Prince, where he says, it's only with the heart that you can see rightly. What's of essence is invisible to the eye. If you're speaking from the heart, the words will follow. And again, it's not about me. It's not about my coming across as non-racist and articulate and eloquent. It's about the issue, and just keep the focus on the issue and feel good that you're doing the best you can to participate. And yeah, you're going to stumble, but if you stop and you listen and accept feedback non-defensively, you'll grow. And that's part of the discomfort, by the way, in the conversation. They're growing pains. Good conversations make us grow.
Yep, that's so true. So true. Lola, I'd love to hear some thoughts from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you, Dr. Norman and Christina, for leading this very important discussion. I think we all agree that discussions around race are very nuanced, and it takes, like you guys said earlier, it takes people really willing to be uncomfortable having these conversations for us to encounter real change. But I have to say, I've seen a lot of sentiment around how it feels different this time. To a lot of Black people or people of color, these things, when they occur, it feels like deja vu. We have the conversations, a lot of actions from corporations or individuals seem reactionary. So Christina, you mentioned earlier about pass the mic now, a lot of reactionary responses. But, it seems like this is an inflection point and things are starting to turn around. So I want to hear from you guys if you feel like, it will be different this time, and how do we actually maintain that sustainable change and make sure that we keep the momentum going long after the news cycle is over?
I think, when we did the Leading Through Change Racial Injustice episode, Melody Hobson came up with, her 3 Ps. Mark added a 4th one, but now there's 8. I think that's how change happens. Mark is holding us all accountable at his level. I think that other companies need to do the same. And then we also have to be able to cascade down into our own organizations. It can't just be Mark believes. It needs to be like the company believes, the leaders believe and they're willing to drive that change. I think that, companies are getting called out left and right for greenwashing, which I love, because, when large corporations write a $12 million check, it's like me writing a $100 check. But what are they doing to actually drive change within their own companies that is sustainable? I think that is the only way. And when people have not been accustomed to having these conversations, you do need to create some sort of framework that they can act against. So there's people, purchasing, policy, philanthropy, and within that is pipeline. How are you making sure that, to your point, people are being seen and elevated and have equal opportunity? How do we ensure that there's equity? How do we make sure that we're supporting our Black-owned minority businesses? How do we ensure that with our purchasing dollars that we are in fact supporting small businesses? But also with our media, how are we making sure that we're elevating them so that they can thrive? With Trailhead, we teach people the skills that they need, not just for the future, but for today. But then how do we do a better job of making sure that people who really need them are going to have access to them, like the pep-up techs or the Merivis vets, who, we expect them to then come in with business plans that are equal to the types of plans that you would see come out of Salesforce. But these are not people who have all gone to, Stanford and Harvard, and they are creating a pipeline to help people get access to the jobs that are there, but they're having a hard time scaling. How do we help them do better? Instead of, again, just pointing the finger and saying, do better. So again, it's layered. How do we make sure that it's not the same people at the same meetings all the time? It's easy to say it's your assistant's fault, but you have eyes. What are you doing? Are you looking around the table? Is it the same 5 people that are always there? What
Right.
voices are you missing from the table? I think there's so many different things that can happen, but it can't just be one person. It needs to be all of us accountable.
I think really beautifully said. We have to make it intolerable. I mean, I'm honestly aghast when I look back at being at Fort Benning, why it didn't turn my stomach. It turns my stomach now. It should have then, but it does now. And it's only when we find it intolerable. And look, the slogan, of course, silence is violence. The other big slogan that's been out there has been no justice, no peace. And I think that's why we have to keep going. There can't be peace. I think that's really what makes us whites uncomfortable, because guess what? Law and order keeps the structure the same, keeps things the same, keeps us in our comfort zone. So it's easy to deflect it to the problem is looters, or the problems is, burning buildings. But no, the problem is racism. And we have to recognize that the call for law and order is itself a racist slogan, no justice, no peace, which I remember hearing when I was a kid from Martin Luther King. He didn't mean violence, he meant no peace, that we have to do our job to keep it constantly in people's minds, because you know what? We have short memories, and my concern is come September, October, when we're all anticipating the possibility of a second surge with COVID, Black Lives Matter will go to the background again, because we'll be focused on, appropriately focused on saving lives from COVID, but we can't take the focus off Black Lives Matter.
I'm very positively encouraged to have leaders like you certainly having these conversations and encouraging other leaders to make sure that they're stepping up to the plate as well, so Salesforce can continue to be an example in this regard. So thank you for all the work you're doing, and thank you, Dr. Norman, for all the work you're doing as well.
Really wonderful. Thank you so much. What a great session. It's by no means the last conversation we're going to have, but it certainly is enlightening, and and it's good to feel that we can be on the same team and we can align together and we can get through this together. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And I do hope you'll
conversations, Jody.
I was going to say, and I am hoping that we'll have more of these, and that you will join us again soon. All right, everyone, get out there and have a good week. Take care. Be well.